Well, I'm Prue Walduck and I'm 64 years young.
I'm Milley and I'm 63.
We've been in a relationship, I'm not good with dates, but 30 years. This is our 31st year.
I'm Peter Jones. I'm 68, going on 69.
I'm Diane Reeves. I'm 68 years old and I've been out as my true self, a transgender woman, for the past 4 years.
Hi, I'm Michael Saunders. I'm 63 years old. I'm a dad, I'm a grandfather, and I'm a soon-to-be married gay man.
I'm about to turn 72 and I'm Max Clarke and I live out here in Walmer.
Hi, I'm Trace Williams and I'm an intersex elder and a member of the seniors community.
Hi, I'm Di and I'm 65 years old.
And I'm Mario and I'm in my 60s.
My name is Jo Comerford and I'm 63.
Well, for me, I always knew that I was attracted to men.
Well, I suppose I knew I was different from a very young age.
Oh, I was living in England, I think in the late 20s I started to realise that it wasn't quite working with women and there must be some reason, and maybe I really did like men. So I looked at a few of the gay magazines and stuff, but I was still thinking I might be bi, that yes, I liked women but I might like men too. And eventually when I got back to Australia, when I was about 30, I started to realise that, well, really, yes, it might be men.
I remember back in Form 2, so when I was 13, another classmate I said to her, "Oh, how would you know if you're a lesbian?" And she said, "Well, do you want to have sex with girls or boys? Do you want to have sex with girls?" And I said, "No." Mind you, when I was 13, I didn't want to have sex with anyone. It was like, that's a dirty word. But I guess in order for it to come up, I'd been probably thinking about it. I also had crushes on female teachers, and I think it took me until I was about 23 for that actually to happen, where I had an affair with a woman.
An intersex person is born with variations to their sex characteristics, and this can be either physical or biological. So it can be, if it's physical, it can be the anatomy of the genitalia, so a difference of genitalia, and otherwise it could be chromosomally or via gonads. There's lots of variations for an intersex person. Who are we? We're like any other person, we're all individuals. We're born in every culture and country of the world. We make up about 1.7% of the population, which is approximately about the same as people who have red hair around the world. So as a child, I think that most children start to understand about things when they're 4 or 5 years of age, and I was brought up as a boy. I remember around that time starting to understand that I was different.
One day I considered myself straight, and then I got seduced by somebody when I was about 18, and I went, oh, yum.
Oh, that started when I was a very small child, but I didn't know who I was, but I knew I didn't fit. And that was the major problem, was the fact that I didn't fit. And I could never understand why, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't allowed to dress as a little girl. When you're a little kid, you try and please your parents, and that's what I did. I went out of my way to please my parents. And that continued right through until teens, where I thought this would be great. I was late going through puberty, and for some unknown reason in the back of my mind I thought, this is not going to happen, it's not going to happen. And then it did, and it nearly killed me, it nearly settled me. That was a very low time in life, was the voice broke and everything went sort of male, and I didn't want to do that.
For me, I started to question my sexuality when I was at high school. always seemed to be more attracted to the female school prefects.
Yeah, it wasn't a really clear-cut thing for me. I mean, I know there was a period when I was really young where I actually even questioned my own even gender for a little while when I was at school, but that was more, I think, because I wanted to do all the things that boys were doing rather than necessarily being unhappy with being a girl. And really, my whole time at school, and even when I was at an all-girls school, and I also was at living in a nursing home, again, all with women. But I can honestly say I don't think I ever heard the word lesbian even mentioned. So it wasn't for me until, I guess, I came back from overseas in the early 70s, and then I started my workplaces and started moving in feminist circles and lots of other areas, starting to meet a lot of lesbians in the 70s, and I was always interested. I was fascinated, I suppose, but I didn't identify at all.
Look, when I was a child, basically, I knew that my attractions were always with girls, and I had very, very close girlfriends at school, and I would sort of pretend that, you know, I was their boyfriend a bit, you know, because that's sort of what was around the fantasy, I suppose.
Oh no, I never came out at all.
I found out my mum told me she had cancer, so for me that became a big issue about whether to tell mum that I was gay, and I didn't, which I regret, but at the time I was trying to protect her. I thought, well, she's got enough to deal with.
And that's often an excuse that's used by gay people. I won't tell my parents because my dad's sick or my mum's sick, or I don't want to upset them. And
yeah, but it's real. It was real.
It's a real thing.
It was real for me, so I didn't tell mum, so she knows now anyway.
I came out here in town. I started, we'd seen Kate McGregor and a few of the high-profile people doing it, and I was very unhappy at this stage. And sat on the bed one night and had a bit of a cry and talked to Linda about it. And we had a pretty solid conversation about this, because it's not only me, it's my partner. Linda's been there for 35 years and she's known for that length of time. And we had to make this decision ourselves, and she said, well, why don't you do it? And I thought, well, why the hell don't I? Now's the time. So I started changing, but I made a mistake. I sort of half changed, half came out. You know, I'd wear a pair of leggings with a long top and that sort of stuff, this androgynous sort of look. And I didn't like it. And I went to the hairdresser, my local hairdresser, she's a lovely lady. And she said, now, which is it? Are you a male or are you female? Are you Diane or are you Dave? And I said, I'm Diane. She said, well, bloody will look like it. She said, you're confusing us. And I thought, well, I'm confusing myself. So people around me were then confused. So I thought, right, well, that's it. Drop all this crap and get on with it, which I did. And I haven't looked back since.
I did get married and had 3 lovely daughters. I tried to find myself through counselling and support, and we had marriage counselling as well as I had personal counselling, and I then started to question, through counselling, some things came out that sort of I started to think about, well, maybe I do have this feeling that I'm not actually heterosexual. I suppose that I had to sort of be honest to myself and say, and that was a big thing to do, because I, in a way, knew I was possibly going to lose the most important things in my life, which were particularly my children.
I did come out to parents who took some time to work out that I was still their son. Mum made maybe more effort than Dad did at first, but yes, later they did accept, and when they met my partner Brian, it was very moving when Dad could put on a Christmas card to you guys and have us together, so that was really good.
I was working in a very conservative position. It was Pricewaterhouse employer, and so chartered accountants and very conservative. And I went to Gay Day. And a couple of days later, I got a phone call from a gay friend. She said, Prue, do you realise you're on the front page of The Truth? I think it was a newspaper, it's called Newspaper. It's a bit of a...
It was a smutty newspaper.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so I'm on the front page of it and I said, well, you've got to be kidding me. And they didn't want to take my photo. The photo was taken because I just happened to be standing behind somebody who had, I think, a crazy hat or a crazy outfit on. So they were taking a photo of that person. So I had to buy this newspaper, ran out the back and found a dark alley and had a look, and I thought, far out, it is me. I was so paranoid, I didn't go to work the next day.
Well, I guess being in Melbourne, and particularly around about that time, so I was in my late 30s, which, you know, it's interesting that I have a lot of friends and I know a lot of women who did not come out until, of my generation, who didn't come out until their late 30s or 40s. Now, a lot of those women moved straight into marriages and had children, and then later on came out. I never married or had children, never wanted to do either of those things, but I often think it was probably because I didn't have the opportunity to be in an environment, you know, really for me. But when I did, it was fine. I think because I was so much older, I was in a group in Melbourne where I felt incredibly supported. No one knew in my hometown, apart from my mum and in my close friends and family. So it wasn't really an issue for me at all because I had instant acceptance with my family, and I was sort of, in a sense, cushioned with a very large group of people.
My community accepted my direction completely. And because I was very separated from my family, they probably didn't find out for a few years, but when I did come out to them, and I'd say, oh, well, you know, this is who I am, I'm a lesbian, and blah, 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 and they go, oh, yeah, we've always known that.
Everyone for Ada is gay till proven straight, and that everyone should be telling everybody they're gay, but, well, if you're going to come out, we're going to continue being together, you need to tell your father, tell Dad. So as you do, I told him during a commercial break, on a commercial, and I said, Dad, have you ever wondered why there aren't any men in my life? And he just thought for a bit, and then he said, oh yes, your mother told me you had a bad experience when you were overseas. And I thought, yeah, I went out with a couple of guys, but I don't know where that came from. And it actually gave me an opportunity to say, oh yes, okay, and that's why there aren't many in my life. But I thought, no, I need to tell him. And I said, look, Dad, it's because I'm gay, I'm a homosexual. And he just said, I'm glad you've told me, I still love you, but I'm not going to throw a party about it.
I want to know, why do they say if you're a homosexual, you're automatically a child molester, pedophile?
I was being a lesbian back then. It was like being branded a sex offender, you know, a pedophile. And to me, that's the worst thing you could be branded. So to come out and tell your family and friends that you're a lesbian, that was difficult.
People have this idea that if you're gay, you're a pedophile, basically. That's the connection they make.
That underlying factor that you knew that if you did a step out of place, you could be in danger, and it's as simple as that. I just avoided it totally. You know, confrontation, I just didn't allow it to happen.
One of the worst thing that was ever said to me, because I was a teacher, I taught in a deaf school, the deaf school in St Kilda Road, Melbourne, and when I was socialising with one of my friends, her husband actually said to me, well, I wouldn't want you to teach my daughter, and that was because I was a lesbian.
We went through the park, Queen's Park, we sat down and it was cold. So after we finished our fish and chips, we smoked then, and I automatically got out a cigarette. But because it was windy, Peter opened his coat, trying to light his cigarette like that, and I went down, tried to light my cigarette, and then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 cop cars just went boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they took us to the Moonpons police station.
Yeah.
Put Peter in one room, put me in another, and they said horrible things to me. I don't know what they were saying to Peter. They wanted me to ring my parents, and I was petrified. I didn't know what.
No.
I didn't know. So I did ring home, and luckily my brother-in-law answered the phone, and I said, "Could you come and pick me up? I'm at the Moonee Ponds police station." He picked me up. Not a word said on the way home. He'd never treated me any different whatsoever.
They asked me the phone number at home, and I gave it to them, hoping they'd ring one. They'll get one of my sisters. But then I looked up. I was in the room, and all of a sudden, my father's just standing there. And my father, being a straight country boy, I just, oh, geez, what am I going to do here? Not a word was spoken. Yeah, but they did charge us with loitering.
Yeah, and we went to court over it.
We went to court loitering with intent.
We were discharged.
So it's the fear of rejection, and back at that time, and look, I think it still happens now, people make jokes about poofters and leso, etc., and you just take that on subconsciously. If you continually hear for 20 odd years that you're not accepted, that you're different.
The language that I grew up with, so the term that was applied to someone like me was hermaphrodite or pseudo-hermaphrodite. Personally, I've experienced lots of discrimination. And discrimination takes lots of forms, we know that. Even the medical fraternity, there's not many doctors who truly understand intersex people and their variation, because it's not, even though they have a basic understanding, it's not taught enough that. But then there's people who have experienced none at all from the medical fraternity. Discrimination in sport, very, very common. And some of that is based on gender choices, which is being addressed now. And with a lot of people, they were discriminated against in a way that was incredibly unkind.
Having unfortunately had an encounter with an organisation, GAMA, which is Gay Married Men's Association, and the guy I spoke to was telling me that, well, you better just get used to it. I haven't seen my children for 21 years, and it's like, that's the way it is. If you come out now as a gay person, the likelihood is you won't see your children. And I felt I could move to where I wanted to go and trust that my children would still love me as much as they did before, even though there was a fairly lengthy period when I wasn't allowed to see them.
When we bought this block of land where we live now, in Harcourt North, which was in 1991, we bought the land and we paid for it, and then we heard later on the person that had sold it to us was telling other members of our community here where we live that he'd sold the land to a couple of lemons on the hill, and
which is really,
that's hurtful. Yeah.
The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence were a group of gay male men who dressed in the old original nun's habit. I started as Sister Mary Outrage, which was the gay magazine Outrage for a long time in Melbourne, and then when eventually they wanted to have a mother, I decided that while I was thinking around laterally for a Dane, that I'd be mother lateral thinking. They were trying to highlight the put down of women by the Catholic Church in the sense that society wasn't accepting of people. And I could go along at, say, Pokey's, a nightclub in Melbourne, and hand out condoms to a couple of men chatting and saying, I'm glad you picked him and don't forget to be safe tonight and here's a condom, which Max couldn't go and do. So the costume gave me a persona that I could go out and do that, well, some safe sex work. There was a time that it worked really quite well because we could go out to various venues and raise awareness about things. I suppose at that time too, that was when I got quite involved with ACT UP, because that had started at the AIDS time, and it was when people could be very vocal about it. I remember sewing a great big black thing with white letters ACT UP on that we could carry in parades, and it was the time when there was a lot of stuff with the quilt project that I was involved with too, when people would present a quilt in memory of a person that they'd known and loved and died. And there was one time ACT UP, another gay person, Adam Carr was the Pope, and a lot of us, including the sisters, marched around St Pat's Maybe if we'd done it 7 times, it would have fallen down. As I finished my social work in '88 was when AIDS line was going a lot, and they had a lot of volunteer counsellors, but they had a couple of us paid there to do shifts there, and I probably answered over the several years there 10,000 phone calls of people inquiring and working out what was happening. I then went to work as the social worker at the Victorian AIDS Council Gay Men's Health Centre, and that was where we helped and assisted a lot of people, and I ran a lot of the David Williams Fund, which was the financial assistance to people who were in need. So there was a lot of changes then, and we lost a lot of people, and we assisted with a lot of funerals. Yes. I never did the counting. There were some people I thought it was quite macabre that they'd lost 147 friends, and I didn't need to know that.
There was nowhere to go. There were really no organisations to turn to. And the nearest that you had was either the gay community, the lesbian community, or the transgender community, who were just starting to form in Australia at the time. My first furore, basically, or my first real outing as a person to go and find out about all these different things was attending the 1979 Mardi Gras. And I was young, I caught the train up. I was terrified standing in the crowd just looking on, you know. It was, but it was an eye-opening experience, you know. But even back then there was so much animosity towards the people that were actually there. It was incredibly unsafe after the parade. There was so many people bashed after the parade, and I was lucky I was not one of those people. It didn't educate me in any way, shape or form, but it opened my eyes up that there are other people out there, and somewhere there must be another person like me. Because I was live in a rural area, I didn't have access to organisations in Melbourne, even though I went to the first meetings of the Gay and Lesbian Rights Lobby, even before it was set up.
Yeah, well, even back in the 70s, like there was around the women's movement and groups, we did a lot of the, Reclaim the Night, and they were highly politicised, and there was a very strong radical lesbian groups and radical feminists, because this was still the 70s, so coming out. So I was certainly part of all of those sort of early sort of marches. A lot of the opening up of the clubs. I was, president of the Girl Bar, Tasty, some of those big nightclubs that are really quite famous now for all sorts of reasons. Tasty definitely because of the raids and the strip searches, and that was all happening at the same time as Girl Bar. Certainly during the 80s I was very active within HIV/AIDS movement because I had a lot of friends. And that was the time when, again, when there were demarcation zones between gay men and lesbian women, didn't do a lot of socialising together at that stage, was quite separate. But through that, we very much came together, and I think that was one of the pivotal points where this unitedness of groups, even coining the terms of the LGBTQI, this is where all of this, I think, really, this homogeny really sort of started.
So I met some other people. I joined a lesbian support club called Links, and that was fantastic. I met other people like myself, which was really what it's about. You want to meet other people who help you to feel affirmed and who you can socialise with, and you just continue learning. So Links was a lesbian social club. I even got one of the brochures here, and as it says on the back, it says it's weekly get-togethers for social activities and support. It's a monthly newsletter. It's a library with access to homosexual literature and videos. It's a network of friendly, supportive women and a meeting place. After a few years, I was actually on the committee where we would meet prospective members in a coffee shop in Melbourne. We would tell them what Links was about, and they would say what they were interested in, and if it all seemed to fit, we'd give them the address of links. A lot of the members were teachers, there were some police women, nurses, doctors, and lots of other professions. When I was social secretary at Links, I decided a good social night would be to have my mum and my aunt, who are very old, they're in their 60s, really old, to have them come and talk to the women at Links, because at that time I was only in my 30s. I was obviously out to my mum and my aunt Sylv, and they were staying with me in Melbourne. So I had them come along to Links, and this was in the newsletter in advance. So Links women could come along and hear how two 60-year-olds felt about hearing that their daughter and goddaughter was a lesbian. It was a fantastic evening. We got heaps of Links women came along. There were probably about 30 or 40 who came along to hear Eunice and Sylvie talk about what it was like. And the sort of answers they got back were very positive. Obviously I wouldn't have brought my mum along if she was negative, but a few weeks after that, I heard that some of the women had actually gone and told their mums. So for 10 years they hadn't been out to their parents, and then some of them told their mums. Usually there were positive responses, occasionally there was a negative response.
From in my early 20s, I used to go in once a weekly to the Women's Centre, which was the Women's Liberation Centre. You know, 1975 was a very big year for women. International Women's Year, there's huge amounts of demonstrations, so I was involved in a lot of, any demo, I'd be there, you know. It was always good to go to a demo.
Also, it's the Alternative Lifestyle organisation that had run a lot of big parties at the Queen's birthday thing, when they would have them all over the countryside, in usually country or semi-rural outside of Melbourne, sports ground, and the Queen would arrive in a helicopter or a stagecoach or something, and they'd had this big Queen's birthday party. And they had the big celebration in Olympic Park, which celebrated the legalisation of homosexuality. Phillip Institute's gay sock sort of didn't really take off because there were venues. There were saunas, there were gay pubs, and it wasn't like in the 60s or 70s at Melbourne Uni when gay sock was the only safe place to be. There were other venues to go to. But we did manage to get Phillip Institute to pay for us to use the student bus to go to Mardi Gras one year. We had a load of people, and I don't know how, but we drove up Oxford Street on Friday night, and the one's parking space was right outside the Oxford Hotel, and so these 10 queens poured out into the street.
It was the first time 2 years ago that intersex people from Australia, New Zealand, also America, marched in unison at Mardi Gras. But before we actually marched, we got together as a group of individuals and activists, and we formulated a statement which was called the Darlington Statement. And then last year we created an affirmation to this statement, which now calls upon people to actually go online, look at the Darlington Statement, read the Darlington Statement. We call upon people to sign up to affirm to that statement as allies to our community.
I feel very secure in my community. This community in this small town has been very supportive. So much so that I find myself not wanting to go elsewhere, because I know I always overdress. I mean, I'm like a dog off a chain. I've been missing out for the last 60 years. I'm going to do it properly. So I overdress. I go down the street and they say, "G'day, Di, how you going?" And it's, you know, they look you up and down and say, "Oh God, here she is again." But it's fine. They're right with it, and all the support you ever want is just here in town. I go to the local hairdresser. I go to the cafe for coffee. We've been involved in clubs in town. I even got asked to join the Coinda group, which is the old CWA group. Yeah. I thought that was a bit of a feather in my cap. And that was very nice. That did me a lot of good, that.
That's cool. I've got a son and grandchildren, and they've grown up and been brought up in Daylesford, and so they've grown up knowing who I am, knowing who lots of people around them are, that they're all different, that there's all different influences, and they are just growing up to be beautiful children. You know, even though I might be a queer nonna, I'm still a nonna. Yeah. Yeah.
In the intersex community, the two most important things we need to get a message out to everybody is respect for language of the person's choice and bodily autonomy. So respect for the person's body.
That the Marriage Act allowed us to make a commitment beyond the commitment we'd already made to each other. And almost immediately he started to do the things I'd been searching for 19 years, which was holding my hand much more often in public, kissing me in public, which was just an absolute no-no. And was not very long after it had happened, we were having breakfast at the cafe in Piper Street in Kyneton, and there was a whole group of guys who'd been to a Bucks party sitting on the tables outside, and we were finished our breakfast, and I thought, I'll give him a kiss in the cafe before he goes to work. My ute was parked right next to these guys, and anyhow he left the restaurant before I could do that, and I came out, and he walked back down in front of them and he kissed me, the biggest passionate kiss. And it was like, I'm thinking, hang on, there's all these guys sitting on these tables, I've got to go around there and get in my ute. But no, and obviously nothing happened, but it was just such a surprise that he did that, and he felt comfortable enough to do it. And we have talked about it since then, and he said, nobody can stop us from doing it now. Like, people can still try to stop you, but the law is now on your side.
So I think marriage equality is so important, and I actually got a bit emotional about it when it came in. We'd been fighting for it for so long. It's something that so many other people take for granted. We haven't got married, but the right to get married is so important.
I was actually quite proud of quite a few organisations in Bendigo, because in the lead up they had the posters, they put them in the windows. I know I went into a couple of those shops, and it did make a decision in my purchasing decision in some cases was based around that, and I think that to me was really important. And I went into a couple of shops even if I didn't want to buy something from that shop, and I did say to them, I really love that you've put that poster up, that's fantastic. And that was even making myself vulnerable when I did that, because clearly I'm saying I'm gay, but I was so glad that they did it. Yeah, it was good.
And I even went to the trouble to get a t-shirt printed.
Yeah.
And it's about, can you pick the odd one out? And the first cards have Tony and Margie since 1988. In the middle, you can see two women jumping up and down. Ada and Prue since 1987. And the third card is Barnaby and Natalie. I don't usually go out and get t-shirts printed, but I was feeling pretty strongly about this issue.
I've never been so happy in all my life. That's all I can say now here in Bendigo. It's just wonderful.
As I said, we don't go out and express to say, hey, do you know that we're gay? We don't. We just go.
Yeah. Mix
with the people. They accept us. We accept them. Whether they're gay or not, we don't ask. No questions whatsoever. We are very well liked up there.
It's never a problem.
Yeah, never.
It's just incredible.
And actually, I have never ever been called either a faggot or a poofter. I have never.
The number of lovely old people, or people my age, who would say, we're voting yes, we're voting yes, we're voting yes, was really, really good.
Like, we have our granddaughters every school holidays, and we take them out and they hold our hands, and nobody bats an eyelid. Called Pa and Poppy. He's been Poppy ever since our first granddaughter was born. It was that acceptance from my family has been there almost since the start. It's interesting because we live in a really small rural community, but there's quite a number of particularly male, more homosexual males, some with partners, some without, in our community. There's probably maybe 8 or 9. When we first moved there was a gay couple that had been living there for 2 or 3 years, and they commented to us, "Don't take any crap from them, we've sorted them out, and they're all like it's okay." And it has been. We've never had any discrimination from our own immediate community. Very open about my relationship with Daryl, with them. They talk about their sons or daughters that are actually gay, and it's surprising how many people who have a connection to LGBTI people.
Well, it's interesting because I've just moved back from the big city, and to be honest, I did feel a little bit, not nervous, but I felt a little more reticent again. I've sort of, you know, when you asked me, Noel, to be part of this, and then we went to the paper and you said, "Great, you have to be interviewed," and I said, "Yeah, but I don't want my photo in the paper." And I was surprised I said that. I thought, come on, you know, what's this about? But see, I was home. I mean, even though Melbourne's been my home, I was back in my hometown, so to speak. And I was really surprised that I was actually a little bit reticent to be out, you know.
And education is one of our most powerful tools. Education in any community is the most powerful tool that you can have.
When we moved up here, we made a conscious decision to be out in this community where we live in Harcourt North. I have to say, all our neighbours are so supportive.
All our straight friends are pretty
they're really supportive. And what was great, and this was way back in late 90s, one neighbour, Margot, came up to us and she said, "It's great having you girls in our community." She said, "I want to bring up my kids to meet you so that they see a positive role model of somebody, a gay couple." And I think we probably underestimate the power of being out and what that can mean.
I would just hope that they can find a safe place to talk to people, to get support, and if they need to refer their parents to PFLAG for the parents of friends and lesbians and gays, there are supports out there for people to learn it's okay. Some of these
wins, some of these privileges that we have now could easily be lost. So I say, you know, keep aware, keep the fight going, look out for everyone, and really keep the brief as open as possible. You know, just that factionalising even within our community, I think, is something to be. The best thing was when we could all come together as a united group politically, but also just to be there for each other. Because if we're not there for each other and we can't support each other, we really can't expect people outside of our community to really understand that. So it's a bit like the united we stand, divided we fall, and I think that's really important for us to keep that going.
Just learn about who you are, you know, and accept who you are, and just be just get better at being who you are. Be you within you.
No one would choose to be gay to suffer the consequences and the discrimination and the non-acceptance and rejection that especially previous generations of gay people. So to me that just affirms it's who we are, and that's okay. And I think for younger people, I really hope if they're questioning their sexuality, I think it's really important to talk to people about it, and you know, hopefully by doing that we can reduce the amount of youth suicide, because a lot of suicide is around people dealing with their sexuality.
And I guess if I could say one last thing, I would say be honest to yourself.
Yeah.
Throughout your life. If you're honest to yourself, then you're on pretty much a good path.
All I can say to them is just find a bit of heart, a bit of courage to come out, because you'll be surprised.
That sort of thing. But the only thing that I could say is, you know, you're gay. You know, you're going to have to accept it. Just come out, you're living with this world. You're going to have to live in this world. Just, you know, if you're getting suppressed from anywhere, ignore it. Just follow your own thing. Don't ever let it get you down, because there's nothing wrong with you.
If your friends and your family
yeah,
love you, they will accept who you are, what you are. And
I wish I was there. I see youth nowadays as, I shouldn't say this, but it is a bit easier for them. I know there's some tough times and there's some awful bloody bad feelings and hurts and whatnot, but the progression that's happened, and it's just not my generation, it's generations before me that have made it very easy, or easier, and it's improving all the time, and that's, to me, it's great. We've got to keep going. So for the juniors, keep it up. You're a long way to go, but you'll get there.
Be proud of who you are. Always be proud of who you are. Know that the elders of your community have your back and will always have your back. And know that we are out there to stop the things that happen to us happening to you. We want you to be individuals. We want you to be proud that you're intersex, and we want you to be able to put your hand up nice and high and say, hey, I'm intersex, but I'm also an individual. And all people in our society need to do that. You know, it doesn't matter the colour of your skin, the sex you're born with, the gender you choose to live in. We all need to be proud, and we all need to be community minded. And when we are, not only will be a better place for you, a better place for your community, a better place for your country, it will also be a better place for this world.